Life doesn't always go the way we expect. One moment, everything feels like it's coming together, and the next, it feels like everything is falling apart. We make plans, set goals, and hope for the best. But sometimes, no matter how hard we try, things just don't work out the way we imagined. It's frustrating, it's confusing, and if we're honest, sometimes it makes us question everything. But what if in those moments of uncertainty, God is actually working things out in a way we just can't see yet? Trusting God's plan isn't easy. I mean, it's one thing to say, God, I trust you, when everything is going well. But when life takes an unexpected turn, when the job falls through, when the relationship ends, when the door we prayed would open just stays shut, that's when trust is really tested. And that's where a lot of us struggle. We want to believe that God has a plan, but when things don't make sense, doubt starts creeping in. We wonder, did we miss something? Are we doing something wrong? Or maybe God has forgotten about us. But here's what I've learned. God's plan doesn't always make sense in the moment, but it always has a purpose. Think about it. Those times in life when something didn't go the way you wanted, but later you realized it was actually for the best. Maybe you didn't get that job, but it led you to a better opportunity. Maybe that relationship ended, but looking back, you see, it wasn't right for you. In the moment, it felt like rejection, but in reality, it was redirection. That's how God works. He sees the bigger picture. We only see a tiny piece of the puzzle, but God, He sees how every piece fits together. And I get it. Trusting God's timing is one of the hardest things to do. We live in a world that tells us to chase after what we want, to make things happen on our own terms. But God doesn't operate on our schedule. Sometimes, He makes us wait. Not because He's punishing us, but because He's preparing us. Maybe He's building our character. Maybe He's teaching us patience. Or maybe He's protecting us from something we can't see yet. Whatever the reason, when we learn to trust His timing instead of forcing our own, we find peace in knowing that everything will happen exactly when it's supposed to. I remember a time in my life when I felt completely lost. I had a plan. I was so sure it was the right one. But nothing was working. No matter what I did, doors kept closing. I started to feel like maybe I had failed, like maybe I wasn't good enough. But then, out of nowhere, an opportunity came along that I never expected, one that changed everything. If I had gotten what I wanted when I wanted it, I would have missed out on something so much better. That's what happens when we trust God's plan. It doesn't mean things will always be easy, but it does mean we can stop stressing over things that are out of our control. And that's the thing. Trusting God isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing that we don't have to. It's about believing that even in the uncertainty, even in the waiting, even when things feel like they're falling apart, God is still in control. He's still working. He's still leading us to something greater. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." That's the foundation of real trust. Not relying on what we see, but believing that God is guiding us, even when we don't understand how. Sometimes God removes things from our lives for our own good. And we might not like it at first, but later, we realize it was a blessing in disguise. Maybe you've been holding on to something that God is trying to take away because He has something better for you. Maybe He's closing a door because He knows that walking through it would lead to pain. Isaiah 55:8-9 tells us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." We have to remember, His perspective is so much greater than ours. If you're feeling stuck, like you don't know what's next. Don't panic. Instead, take a step back and ask yourself, am I trying to control everything or am I allowing God to lead? We sometimes hold on so tightly to our own plans that we don't leave room for God to move. But when we surrender, when we say, God, I trust you no matter what, that's when we see doors open that we never even considered. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Even when life feels uncertain, God already knows where He's leading you. And it's also important to remember that God doesn't just have a plan for your life. He's walking with you through it. Sometimes we feel like we have to figure everything out on our own, but God never intended for us to carry that weight. Matthew 11:28-30 reminds us, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Trusting God isn't just about believing He has a plan. It's about resting in the fact that we don't have to do it all alone. Maybe you're in a season of transition right now. Maybe you're waiting on an answer, trying to figure out what's next. Instead of stressing over what you can't control, choose to trust that God is working behind the scenes. The more you surrender, the more you'll realize that even the hardest seasons are shaping you for something greater. You might not see it yet, but God is leading you exactly where you're meant to be. And when you look back, you'll realize that every challenge, every delay, and every unexpected moment was a part of His perfect plan.